Hi, good evening. My name is Derek Yandabi, and this is my presentation on my research study. The project I've been working on this past 5 weeks, and I'm here to present it. And this is my research question. So, my research question is: what is the applicability of the right to life as a non-derogable right in Uganda? Um, In this research, I've been supervised by Professor Natalie Whitaker, and I am her student. And let's delve right away into the research uh, content. On my agenda, I'll be talking about my introduction of the research study, and also I'll talk about chapter one, the content in chapter one, then chapter two, the content in chapter two, then chapter three, the content in chapter three, and then chapter four, and the content in chapter four. I will also have conclusions and also my stand as well as the references, and then the last slide, which will close this presentation, will be the thank you slide. Let's delve right away into the introduction. The right to life is an inherent and inalienable human right recognized by international instruments like the UDHR and ICCPR and enshrined in Uganda's constitution. It's mandated It mandates the protection of life and prohibits arbitrary deprivation by the state or its agents. Article 3 of the UDHR and Article 6 of the ICCPR affirms this right, which is also upheld by Uganda's constitution under Article 22. The Constitution prohibits the intentional deprivation of life except through lawful execution following a fair trial and protects the life of unborn children. This is rooted in the national law and justice. This right forms the foundation of all other human rights as it is seen in the Ugandan laws as well as the international laws which protect the human rights. Uh, I'll be discussing chapter one, which comprises of the methodologies I use to collect the data which I use in my research. One, I used qualitative research methods whereby I used the thematic analysis by identifying recurring themes and sub-themes related to attitudes towards the death penalty. Secondly, under qualitative methods, I use the content analysis whereby qualifying the presence of specific themes and sentiments in the qualitative data. The second methodology, which is statistical methods, I use the descriptive statistics as we shall see later on in the following slides. Statistics, descriptive statistics, where I used mean, standard deviation, and range of continuous variables, counts and percentages, and categorical variables. Two, I used the comparative analysis, comparing means and proportion of attitudes towards death penalties across retentionist and abolitionist countries. This can be shown in the graph. There was a table before I formed to form this graph, whereby I got all this information. And the other thing is that I used the regression analysis, whereby multi-level modeling in brackets hierarchical linear modeling to assess the impact of individuals and country level predictors on attitudes towards the death penalty. Another thing I used is the quantitative data analysis, whereby I used data cleaning. The data set will include information on individual attitudes towards the death penalty, demographic details, and country level indicators. Initial data cleaning involved checking for missing values, outliers, and inconsistencies. Another thing is I used descriptive statistics where I calculated and summarized the data. I'll delve right away into the statement of the problem. Subarticles 6 of the ICCPR protects the inherent right to life, allowing the death penalty only for severe crimes under strict conditions. Article 4, Clause 1 prohibits derogation from this protection. Researchers are examining Uganda's adherence to these obligations to ensure the right to life is respected and not derogated from it. This is a visual analysis of the countries which support death penalty on average. It is titled Average Death Penalty Support per Country Type. It shows the evidence of the analysis of the different countries and their response to the act of death penalty as a punishment, a corporal punishment. This table shows the key indicators of the right to life in Uganda. It has three sections or columns, which include the indicator value source. And this can be seen, it was estimated uh, depending on the 45.6 million Ugandans. Chapter 2, this is the literature review, and I'll just try to delve through it quickly. The Supreme Court of Uganda in 2009, ruling in the Attorney General versus Susan Kigula and others, which were 417 others, marked a significant step towards the abolition of the mandatory death penalty. The court declared the mandatory death penalty unconditional, emphasizing that it violated the right to fair trial by denying a proper sentencing hearing. The decision restored judicial discretion, reducing the number of death sentences and prompting alternative punishments like life imprisonment. The court highlighted the inherent and inalienable right to life, acknowledging the severe consequences of capital punishments. However, it stopped short of abolishing the death penalty entirely. The ruling prompted a debate on the death penalty's constitutionality, suggesting the need for legislative reform to abolish it and align Uganda's laws with international human rights standards. Chapter 3, this is the critical analysis of the legal framework that governs protection and respect of the human life. Chapter 3 critically examines the legal framework governing the right to life, highlighting its recognition as an inherent but not absolute right under the international and Ugandan laws. Key international instruments like the UDHR and ICCPR outline the right to life but allow the allow for capital punishments under certain conditions, showing inconsistencies in the protection of this right. The UDHR promotes the right to life without explicit reference to capital punishments, while the ICCPR permits its severe crime, creating a tension between inherent rights and state imposed limitations. Secondly, Uganda's constitution acknowledges the right to life but permits capital punishments for specific crimes. Various domestic laws, including the Penal Code Act, UPDF Act, and Terrorism Act, prescribe the death penalty for several offences, despite the constitutional and legislative provisions. The right to life is not treated as absolute, evidenced by the Uganda's retention and application of the death penalty. The chapter also critiques the moral and ethical implication of the death penalty, urging cons- urging it constitutes torture and dehumanization of individuals. Additionally, Uganda's legal stance on abortion, as outlined in the Penal Code Act, recognizes the circumstances where abortion is permissible, raising further debates on the right to life of the unborn child. The chapter calls for the abolition of the death penalty to ensure the right to life is upheld without limitation. Chapter 4, these are my research findings and recommendations. The research reveals that while the right to life is recognized by both international human rights instruments and Ugandan constitution, it is not upheld as an absolute right. Uganda has failed to comply with the prohibition against arbitrary deprivation of life, evidenced by extrajudicial killing by the street officers that are often justified by the government. The study also notes that both international and domestic laws prioritize the life of a pregnant woman over the fetus, permitting abortion under certain conditions. Despite the Supreme Court's abolition of the mandatory death penalty, the death penalty remains constitutional and practiced under various laws. I argue that the death penalty violates the inherent right to life and serves as a state revenge rather than promoting reconciliation and rehabilitation. Uganda's reluctance on onto ratifying the second optional protocol to the ICCPR, which calls for the abolition of the death penalty, further highlights this issue. The principle of prerogative of mercy is also criticized for its lack of independence and potential bias. Recommendations include amending laws to guarantee the right to life as an absolute right, enforcing measures against extrajudicial judicial killings, recognizing prenatal life, abolishing the death penalty, investigating extrajudicial judicial killings effectively, and establishing an independent advisory committee on the prerogative of mercy. This is my summary of this whole research. The research highlights that while Uganda's constitution and international human rights instrument recognize the right to life, this right is not absolute in practice. Extrajudicial killings by statutory officers persist, often justified by the government. The law prioritizes the life of a pregnant woman over the fetus, allowing abortion under certain conditions. Despite abolishing the mandatory death penalty, Uganda retains it under various laws. Recommendations include amending conflicting laws to guarantee the right to life as absolute, enforcing measures against extrajudicial killings, recognizing prenatal life, abolishing the death penalty, and establishing an independent advisory committee on the prerogative of mercy. Conclusion. The study concludes that despite Uganda's constitutional and international obligation to protect the right to life, this right is not fully respected or protected in practice. Rampant extrajudicial killings and the normalization of such acts by the state violates Uganda's obligations under the ICCPR and the Constitution. Additionally, there is a legal lacuna as both international and national laws fail to guarantee the right to life as absolute, permitting death penalty under certain circumstances. The researchers argue that the death penalty is a violation of the inherent right to life and is an inappropriate punishment due to its irreversible nature. In, in the total meaning, it means that when a person is killed, the person's life is irreversible and cannot be retained into action. The study recommends amending international and national legislations to guarantee the right to life as absolute and abolish the death penalty. Specifically, it calls for Uganda to ratify the second optional protocol to the ICCPR, which aims at abolishing the death penalty. It also suggests that the Committee on Civil and Political Rights amend provisions allowing reservations for the death penalty to achieve the absolute abolition. The research emphasizes that the inherent right to life, as recognized by both legal and Christian perspectives, should be protected without limitations, allowing every human being to enjoy this right fully. These are my bibliography of the references. As outlined in here, I use the Amnesty International. I use the Amnesty International, the State of the World Human Rights. I used also the Amnesty International report on death penalty. I also used the Center for Reproductive Rights. I also used the Chokerson, 1995, the State versus Mkwanyane. I also used the Committee on Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. I also used the Fitzpatrick Joan 1994 Human Rights in Crisis, the International System of Protecting Rights During State of Emergency. This is a continuation of the references where I used death penalty in the Great Lakes region, Africa. I also used the Human Rights and Peace Center in 2019, abuse of civil and political rights in the area of Kisanja, Hakuna Michezo. Human Rights Committee 2000, concluding observations to Argentina, abortion and women's human rights. I also used the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. I also used the Ivan Sebeni, October 14th, 2022, report on death penalty statistics in Uganda, New Vision, current statistics of death penalty. I also used the case of Kirk Bloodsworth versus the state of Maryland. I also used the KL versus Peru case. I also used the Lakshmi Dikta versus government of Nepal. I also used the Bible verse, Luke chapter 6, verse 27, the New King James Version of the Bible. I also used the Meyerson BA 2001 Neurosurgical approach to pain treatment. I also used the case in Panga Ivan 2019 death penalty and its implication on the right to life in Uganda. I also used Russia Ball 2011 absolute and non-derogable rights in international law. I also used the Bible verse Romans chapter 12 verse 19 under the New King James Version. I also used Ruto Jepchumba Joyce 2010. Should death penalty be abolished in Uganda? I also used Serfontein EM 2015. I also used the Anti-Terrorism Act 2002. I also used the Constitution of Uganda 1995, a continuation of the bibliography stroke reference. I also used the Independent 2021 lawyers concerned over extrajudicial killings. I also used the Law Revision Penalties in Criminal Matters Miscellaneous Amendment Bill 2015. I also used the Penal Code Act Cap 120. I also used the second optional protocol to ICCPR on abolition of death penalty. I also used the Uganda People's Defence Force Act 2005. I also used Tom Finnegan 2020 Right to Life in International Human Rights Law UDHR. I also used the UN General Comment number 6, Article 6, Clause 1. I also used the link as stated down here, www.extrajudicialexecutions.org. I also used William Shaber 2003, The Abolition of Death Penalty in International Law, Cambridge University Press. I would like to thank you, all of you who have listened to my research. I remain Derek Nadavi, and this has been my excerpt of my presentation. Thank you.